There is no place has built a truly diverse center that is a center of innovation where you're seeing social mobility across the community. That's Miami's opportunity. And that's where, if Miami can pull that off, that presents something that we can be globally differentiated.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, creators, and disruptors who are fueling innovation in markets across the nation. My name is Tyler Kelly. I'm here with my co-host, Leanne Buchanan.
Hello, everybody.
And we are really excited because today we have with us Mr. Matt Haggman. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Matt, this conversation is a long time coming. We were talking about this, I think, on a Zoom call a couple months ago, and we realized you had not yet been on Innovation
Never.
City.
My first time.
So welcome.
It's great to be here.
We're going to talk a lot about what you do and how you view your work as a catalyst for innovation and how innovative it is. But first, we want to talk about you as a person.
Okay.
So my favorite question to ask our guests as we kick off the conversation.
Oh boy, and I'm nervous.
And you know me very well. Is what is your superpower and how did you come to discover it?
I would say my superpower is my curiosity about people and their stories. That's why I loved being a journalist. That's the part of whatever role I've been in that I've always enjoyed the most is the learning, in particular learning about people and their personal stories.
That's actually so apropos because you are often the person that is asking the somewhat philosophical but practical questions, which is how might we do X, Y, or Z, or how might we think differently about things? So that leads me to my other question. What are you curious about right now? What is sparking your curiosity these days?
I think as we think about Miami right now and the role I'm in currently is thinking about what's next for this community that, we've all invested so much time and energy in, the place that we love. We're in this really extraordinary moment. I think COVID in so many ways has been this moment of giant reevaluation, right? It's been this moment where, we've been thinking about, what's important in life? Who do we want to spend time with? Where do we want to be? What do we want to do? People have talked about this being the great resignation in terms of the what to do question. And so many people saying, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do something else. But also so many people have said, I'm going to live someplace else. And, as people have looked at the map amid this reevaluation, more and more people have said, you know what, I want to be in Miami. And that presents really this really interesting opportunity for our community, thinking about where we go next. Because by the way, all of us here around this table made that same decision too. I mean, the majority, over 75% of Miami residents are someplace else. That includes all of us here. And I know for myself, it's actually it was December of 2001 that I arrived here. So it'll be 20 years next month, and in 20 years in December. And I arrived here thinking it would just be a year or two. I arrived here to work as a reporter, and thinking it would be a year or two and off to another city. Instead, I found home. And one of the primary reasons why was so rooted here was that it's a place where I think everyone together sort of making up this city, and that we each could have a role in its arc. And as we sit here now thinking about sort of what is that sort of next step, those next steps that we take in the sort of the arc of the city.
Thinking about arcs and journeys, your curiosity has led you to have many different roles over time. You mentioned being a journalist, but just take a couple moments and walk us through the different parts of your curious journey professionally.
Absolutely. So I was a journalist for 10 years, most of the time at the Miami Herald, back when the Herald was, had offices on the Bay at One Herald Plaza. And, in my 10 years as a journalist, I covered lawyers. Then I covered real estate developers. I covered real estate and the boom that, in 06, 07, 08, and it was a really interesting time when people were talking about, how places like Midtown and Wynwood and Brickell could be places where people lived and worked. In fact, the return to the city was something that was underway, but still very much unrealized. Then I worked as an investigative reporter, and then I covered local government. So it was, following lawyers, real estate developers, and local politicians around. It was this graduate course in Miami, right? Where you could sort of look under the hood. But along that way, working as a reporter, even though, you'd see the good and plenty of the bad, I really fell in love with the city. And decided that I wanted to have a more proactive role. I mean, as a journalist, you can do amazing things and have real impact. But at the end of the day, the moment you write a story, it's sort of up to other actors to carry that forward. And so I had the opportunity to go to Knight Foundation to work as the Miami program director at Knight Foundation. So I moved over at the end of 2011. And, the CEO at the time, a guy named the CEO now, Alberto Ibargüen, I arrived, and he had said, and he, by the way, had been the publisher of the Herald when I went to work at the Herald. And he said, go talk to people for 4 months and tell me what we should do next in Miami. I said, sure. I'll go be a reporter. And so went and talked to people and came back in early 2012. He sat down in his office and he said, so what do you think we should do? And said, you know what? We should launch a program focused on building Miami's tech and startup community. And, so there was plenty of questions about that. Thinking that Miami could be one of those places was something that there was plenty of skepticism, but there was also plenty of belief too. And off we went. And so it was, for 6+ years, built the program. And then in end of 2017, started getting this itch. I'd never been involved in politics. And but I just found myself reflecting on the 2016 election, at least for me, that just left me in a sort of not a particularly happy place, and it felt like we'd really taken for me personally, just felt like we'd really taken a wrong turn, and thought if there's ever a moment to do something crazy, this was one of those moments. And so walked, resigned my role at Knight Foundation, went home and told Danette, my wife, said, all right, let's figure out how to run for Congress. And so off we went.
Yep.
And with your amazing support, Leanne, and it was an amazing experience. Of course, midway through, we were feeling so good and excited, but life takes interesting turns. And of course, we had the surprise of Donna Shalala, the former president of the University of Miami, jumping into the race. And so she went off to Congress, and things happen for a reason in life. And now, of course, now I have this opportunity at Beacon Council to reimagine this whole initiative around where do we go next as a community. And it's something that was interesting to me because I love Miami, number one. Number two, it's an opportunity to build on all that work at Knight Foundation. We're doing it in a different way and more broadly focusing on the economy generally. And it's, it's always fun to try and think and live in the future a little bit. So that's been the journey to almost 20 years now.
Wow. I want to talk about in more detail what it's like to start from scratch, specifically in this innovation ecosystem, the startup community. What was it like before? We know what it's like now. What was it like before?
Yeah. So, the reason why, the rationale was sort of one, you could tell back then that there was a global trend underway. That is that, the cost to create and do were going down. So the ability to act and drive change is going up exponentially. And so the thesis was, well, if that's the case, which it is, that while the primary centers of innovation won't go away, but there'll be new complementary centers of innovation will emerge, right? It's just inevitable that that talent and capital will ultimately become more distributed, right? Not saying that a place like Silicon Valley is going to go away, but there'll be some distribution and these new places will emerge. And the bet was that Miami could be one of these places. And the reason why Miami is already there had been several things happening here that thought we could build a startup community on top of. There'd been a whole effort around building the arts community. And really the signature moment in that effort was when Art Basel chose to come here. There had been a big effort in terms of revitalizing the urban core. And that was, you could see that was well underway. Miami had a unique diversity and become really uniquely international as a community. And then in terms of our universities, we were really interesting. We were reaching a point of an interesting critical mass. Miami-Dade College, the largest and most diverse campus-based college in the country. FIU, among the largest public research universities and the most diverse public research university. And UM had become a top 50 university. It felt like, all of those pieces that we could build, an innovation ecosystem on top of.
So with that experience, you talk about it with Beacon Council. What's next? What is next
for
Miami?
Yeah. So I really think it's around three things as we think about our future. Number one, I think all the work that so many across the community have been doing over the last decade to build Miami's tech and startup community. I think now, that, and of course during COVID, we've seen a big jump with this amazing migration here, which has really been extraordinary and awesome. I think that work must continue, and I think Miami has the opportunity to really cement itself as one of the really leading cities in this emergent group of cities of new centers of innovation globally. Miami can be one of the leading cities globally among these new emergent cities. So that's number one. Number two, I really think Miami has the opportunity to build a uniquely diverse and skilled workforce that can be globally differentiated. That is, Miami can stand out of having this diverse, really skilled workforce that's unlike anything else globally, or maybe just a handful of communities. And number three, I think the big thing is around Miami being a leader in the transition to building a carbon neutral economy. And what does that mean? So it's that, is between now and 2050, the moment that scientists have identified that if we don't slow warming, that some really bad things will happen. That over this journey, we're going to see efforts, we're already seeing efforts, but they'll continue to accelerate to turn all the different parts of our economy to ones that are net zero, right? On that journey, that, and so often we think about that as a threat, but would argue that also, and it is a threat, but I would argue that it also presents an historic business opportunity. That is on this journey that we'll see more industries, more companies, more jobs created, and the communities that really lean into that will be the communities that become economic leaders. And I think Miami can be one of those places.
Matt, I want to talk a little bit about one of your in-between moments, right?
Sure.
We talked about Ignite, talked about Opportunity Miami, but I want to talk about Congress for a second.
All right, let's do it.
I don't know if you remember what I said to you when you called me and asked me to get on board, but it was interesting because I always framed your campaign as a startup.
Yeah.
That you
Totally.
were jumping ship to go launch a startup.
Yes, very much so.
And the majority of startups fail. We know that.
Yes.
But I want to talk about some of the lessons you learned from that experience, because every experience is there to create some opportunity to learn and some new insights. So what is the biggest lesson that you learned from that particular time in your life? Well,
it's God, there were so many. So it's hard to pick one. One thing that for sure stands out about, and anyone who is contemplating running need to account for this early on, is that the one thing is when you run for office is that there is sort of an expiration date. That is election day, right? Unlike a startup. I mean, you can of course have the same pressures with a startup. Hey, I'm going to run out of money at this point if we don't raise another round or actually build revenues or whatever. But there is a point at which you can't. There's no delaying product launch in a campaign. There is, so it's literally every minute of every day. You can't. Once you lose, there's no getting that back, right? And the challenge there was sort of I mean, for example, when I joined Knight Foundation, and when that story I mentioned, Alberto said, go talk to people for 4 months and tell them what you should do next. Well, I did that, and then with Ben Wers, who you know well, Leanne, we went out and we did 3 tests to see if it would work, and then like 3-4 months later, then we finally launched. I remember sitting down with Nancy Dahlberg in summer of 2012 saying, hey, we're going to launch this program. And there's a story then announcing the launch of the program that she wrote. All in, that journey right there, that was probably 9-10 months. In the scope of a campaign, you're like in the stretch run, right? So for the political campaign, one of the things realized very quickly is just you have to learn much faster, and that's also the benefit of gaining experience of running, because if you were to do it again, I'm not, but if you were to do it again, you have the benefit of all of those learnings. That's why oftentimes I think you see people who have had lots of success in politics have lost early on. They sort of needed to go through that to gain those lessons to then apply for later.
One of the things that I thought was unique about your campaign, and maybe me having no experience in the political world.
That's both of us.
I know,
Yes.
right? We learned was, we started a series of these coffee conversations, and you spent a lot of time knocking on doors, talking to people, and learning about their stories.
That was my favorite part of being a candidate. Yeah.
And I'm sure you just got such a different perspective around Miami. And so I guess my next question is, Miami it's a majority minority city.
Yeah.
But we still struggle with inclusion. It's one of the main points that we put in the Miami Tech Manifesto. How are you beginning to think about reconciling this push for diversity, yet some of the gaps we have around inclusion and true kind of inclusive economy?
Look, this is our great opportunity, right? I mean, I think the only way to do it, though, is being present on the ground, in the community, right? And doing that over and over and over again, right? And the only way we're really going to understand where the pressure points are and where the opportunities reside is through those conversations and through that engagement over and over and over and over again. But this is Miami's great opportunity, right? That as we think around, in this new effort that launching that is called Opportunity Miami, there are 3 areas of focus: entrepreneurship and innovation, talent and inclusion, and sustainability and resilience from a business perspective. As we think around talent and inclusion, our great opportunity is, there is no place has built a truly diverse center that is a center of innovation where you're seeing social mobility across the community. That's Miami's opportunity. And that's where, if Miami can pull that off, that presents something that we can be globally differentiated.
So what's the first step to make that happen?
I think in terms of
Social mobility.
Oh, social mobility. Sure, absolutely. So, I think number one is stating it as a goal and a value, right? That there was being really, really clear that this is what we want to do. And we are going to be investing time, money, on what is this key priority for us as a community, right? Number 2, meeting people where they are, right? Being in community, really understanding what the pressure points are. I mean, in your work, Leanne, particularly in Overtown, for example, there have been all kinds of learnings, right? In terms of working with entrepreneurs, where it's like, where it goes way beyond, for example, just a business. Yep. Issues such as childcare, for example, right? Issues such as transportation, right? Those sorts of things, when the very best idea is crushed even before it can get started because of these other things that you're not even, if you're just thinking purely about a business, that you're not even thinking about. But if you're there, if you're meeting people where they are, understanding where their pain points are in their life, right? It's just, as we think about, I think the most successful communities going forward are going to be the ones that create ways in which people can gain new skills quickly, affordably, and in ways that align with their own lives. And that's what I mean. If you have childcare issues and you can't, get to a class, where what's a way that you can do it at home? Well, do we have good enough, high-speed internet to allow for that, right? And there's studies that show some actually alarming deficits here in our community around that. So I think it really, the key step is being in community and meeting people where they are. And then, of course, then the hard work of actually then solving for those things, whether it's internet, whether it's transportation, whether it's childcare, whether it's access to funding, and then go about the hard work of actually doing it.
Yeah, I think that third point around the hard work is where most communities and cities fail.
Right.
Because it's not so easy to conceptualize, but you can get there.
Totally.
And then once you understand the challenges, you can design for them. But execution is always the difference in the startup world and entrepreneurship. And I also think in building inclusive economies and communities. And so I'm really excited about this challenge that you have ahead of you. But I think you're going to do it in partnership as always. So
Totally.
we have a stay tuned opportunity here.
You bet. It'll only work. But the idea of Opportunity Miami, the hope for it is to create something that can move beyond election cycles, move beyond news cycles. That is making the case as we move forward and putting it atop the agenda, presenting best practices, the very best ideas about how we can continue to build that truly inclusive economy that's driving social mobility across the community to realize what is really an exciting ideal.
Yep. And as we've talked about, accountability.
Yeah.
Those benchmarks, that
Totally.
data,
Totally.
that projects we've been working on. So do you know what time it is, Matt?
What? Is this what's your word time?
It's the lightning round.
Oh boy.
So
I
are
see
you
you
ready?
holding those cards. I'm nervous.
Oh, I can't
She's
wait.
excited.
I'm like, this is my favorite. I love the conversations, but I must say this is probably my favorite part. You want to go first, Tyler?
You want me to go first?
How many of
Yeah.
these we got? Just so I'm ready.
We don't. We
don't
actually
know.
don't
We
know.
just
We'll
don't
kind
know.
of just go with the flow.
We just go
like
with
everything.
it. Okay. So in lightning round. So I guess that means I give short answers.
Short.
Okay.
But-
all right, I'll try.
But deep.
Deep. Okay. Short, but deep. Okay.
Who are your heroes?
So number one, Danette,
Loved it.
my wife. We met and after a year and a half of moving here, moved to Miami, didn't know a person here, and a year and a half in, met Danette, and she is simply extraordinary. As I tell her all the time, I've never met someone who is so loving, so much fun to be around, so hardworking, so tough, and so it's and so smart, of course, number one, and so I would put Danette far and away as my greatest hero.
I love it. She is amazing. Just for
Thank
those that
you.
don't know
Thank
her, she
you.
is amazing. So Matt, what question would you ask a fortune teller?
The question I would ask a fortune teller is, well, we can't ask about. I guess we can't be asking about this weekend's NFL games for the fortune teller, right? Tyler, I guess, are you
I'm not a Dolphins fan.
you're not
no.
a Dolphin. Okay. So what would I ask a fortune? I would ask a fortune teller. Let's think about. Here's we're talking about Miami. I would ask a fortune teller, what's the city that you see here in Miami 50 years from now? Because I think so oftentimes, you go back to the sea level rise discussion, right? Miami is so dynamic and changes. Just the city that, as we were talking about beforehand, that we all found when we got here, as opposed to the one we see here today, dramatically different. We know the city 5 years from now, 10 years will be dramatically different still. Shoot, I wonder what that city will look like 50 years from now. So I'd be curious.
What is the kindest thing that someone has done for you?
I've been really lucky and blessed that I've had lots of kindness throughout life, but I'll just pick out one. And I don't know why this popped into my head. This is a really random one, and I don't think I've thought about it since then. But I remember my first day in high school when we had lockers, and I couldn't figure out how to unlock my locker, and I'm like messing with it, and this woman walked up very quietly and just helped me do it, and then just walked away. And all the anxiety of that first day of high school, and then sort of getting focused around this one thing of trying to open my locker, and someone came back and gave me a hand.
I love it. Last question. Where have you found peace?
At home. It's funny. I think that, one of the gifts of COVID, I think we can all get into these cycles where you get busy and doing this and that, and it can be a lot of fun, right? Meeting, really interesting people and doing cool, fun things. But one of the gifts of COVID I enjoyed was just being still, and just loved being at home with Danette, and honestly didn't have an aspiration to be anyplace else.
Awesome.
Matt, how can people get in touch with you, with Beacon Council? All of the
Sure.
above?
You can reach me you can reach me on my cell phone, 305-401-3300. When I was a reporter, I used to put my cell phone on my voicemail at the Herald. So always can be reached there. Or you can reach me now at my Opportunity Miami email, matt@opportunity.miami. And also you can go to our website, opportunity.miami. Sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on social at Opportunity MIA on all social channels.
Awesome. Matt, this has been so much fun, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to sit down and dig a little bit deeper into kind of the thinking and the purpose and the why behind a lot of the amazing things you've done to really make Miami a hub for innovation. So Thank you.
Thank you. This has really been fun.
Awesome.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for listening to Innovation City. If you like this episode, you can find more episodes at innovationcity.co or anywhere where you watch or listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams